You mentioned there sort of getting put off by big prices. One big price Liverpool could well have been put off by is that placed on Cheick Doucoure. Crystal Palace reportedly sort of slapping a £70 million price tag. I guess some of that, as I alluded to earlier, has been made up by sort of the Declan Rice figure setting the benchmark. But he's the latest name linked with Liverpool in a relatively big way. All the big journos and all the big outlets are saying there is definitely an interest there. I spoke to Neil Jones earlier on today, and he said, yeah, definitely one we're looking at. So what do you make of him? Obviously, again, a pretty small sample size in terms of Premier League. He's only been here for a year. But what did you make of him, and do his numbers stack up, I guess?
Yeah, I do like him. I'd sort of file him similarly to Palhinha. Obviously younger, so that the age is much better for Liverpool in that sense. But he essentially he was available last summer. Lons sold him to Crystal Palace for 21 million, I think it was. And obviously, as we all know, Liverpool needed a midfielder last summer, whether they agreed to that or not. Ultimately settling for Arthur Melo, but with Doucoure available, if he's going to end up costing 70, 80 million pounds, again, you'd look back at it and say, well, we should have just signed him last year. Because it's not as if he wasn't like a complete unknown at Lons. He was one of their best players. He played in a midfield with Seko Fofana, who maybe got more of the headlines, but Doucoure was still fairly well known as being one of their better players. Again, his numbers in France in that year were up there with everyone in terms of winning the ball back. His passing has been pretty good as well. And he profiled well, and I think a lot of people were expecting him to go to, again, with all due respect to Crystal Palace, a bigger club than them last summer. But now he probably will move on to a bigger club in the next year or two. But Crystal Palace, as a Premier League team with a ton of money, don't have to sell for anything less than a giant fee. So that's kind of the issue with. I don't know. Obviously, if this is what Liverpool did, but the idea of allowing a player like that to go to a mid-table Premier League team to see how they do in the Premier League, and then just trying to buy them later because the price goes up so much because Premier League teams obviously have so much money. But as a player, yeah, I do like him. I actually saw him live the other day. My local team, Crawley Town, played Crystal Palace in a friendly, and Doucoure played 70 minutes of that game. So I watched him quite closely. It was difficult to watch too closely because Eberici Eze was playing as well, and he was utterly phenomenal, like ridiculously good. It was like watching those videos you see of like a professional playing against like 1,000 children dribbling all around him. He was basically doing that to Crawley's defense. So that was quite fun. But yeah, Doucoure, he looked good, tidy enough on the ball, a few really good like nickings of the ball in crucial moments. So he seems his positioning was really good, his awareness. He plays as a lone six as well in that midfield. So yeah, again, as I sort of said with Palhinha earlier, I would basically say because the most important thing is Liverpool buying a good player, I'd ultimately veer on the side of yes with Doucoure because I think he is a good player and he'd be a good addition for Liverpool. But there'd invariably be things like we should have just got him last year for much cheaper. We'll have ended up paying 40, 50 million extra just because we didn't want to take a risk last year, which seems a bit strange for a club that obviously doesn't spend vast amounts of money.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it feels like, I don't know, our transfer policy might have to adapt with the times a little bit on that because we don't take those risks. Like Brighton have absolutely mastered it. Crystal Palace have got it right in this instance, as you say. So maybe we do need to be a little bit smarter with the way we're scouting and sort of identifying these players. Because you're right, it feels like we do identify them. We've got them on a list somewhere in a folder, in a file. And then we let them go somewhere else, and then they develop and they emerge. We go, oh, actually, yeah, we really like that lad. So, but it's almost too late by then. Like could well prove to be the case in this one. And speaking of Brighton, this wasn't even intentional. My final player I wanted to ask you about. I think for many people, would be the ideal option to come in and replace, in inverted commas, Fabinho as Moises Caicedo. Is he the ideal option? Like numbers wise, eye test wise, is he, and he be the one?
Yeah, I mean, whether he be the ideal option, I'm not sure. I mean, for me, the ideal option would have been Declan Rice. I think he would have been absolutely perfect, but obviously that ship has very much sailed. Aurelien Chouameni as well, absolutely love him, but unfortunately he doesn't seem to love us. So he's going to stay at Real Madrid. But Caicedo is a fantastic player. Interestingly, numbers wise, he's good. Obviously, as I mentioned earlier, what he did make the second most tackles in the Premier League earlier with 100, and his numbers under, I can't remember them off the top of my head, but his numbers in terms of passing under pressure is very impressive. Obviously, that the way Brighton play, you're going to get that quite a lot, and we've seen already with Alexis McAllister how good he is at that. So that's how they build their midfield, and they're absolutely supreme in those moments. with Caicedo, I think maybe it's. I don't feel wouldn't feel it as much as the other ones in terms of like should have got him beforehand, because I think obviously he was playing in the Ecuadorian league. That is fairly obscure, and that is obviously a big risk to bring him from there. Although, as I understand it, Liverpool and Manchester United did still want to sign him from Ecuador, but he chose Brighton because he knew he'd get chances there. So I don't think it was necessarily a case of missing out on him then either. So maybe we shouldn't focus on the fact that weren't able to sign him for 4 million a couple of years ago, and maybe having to pay 100 for him now. But I also don't think it's going to be a problem for us, because it looks like he is going to Chelsea, as you say. So yeah, that's it. It's one where I think if there's any chance of hijacking that deal, I think it should be investigated, because he's a fantastic player and probably would be ideal. And of course, has already developed a playing relationship with Alexis McAllister. So that would help both of them, I think, to settle into the team. It might be a bit awkward because I know they both posted like emotional goodbyes to each other on social media, so that might be a bit weird if they see each other again so soon. But it sounds like the player's got his heart set on Chelsea, which is a shame. Or more to the point, I read something the other day, supposedly a quote from him, that he's really looking forward to living in London. So it might be that old chestnut. So if someone can maybe tell him it's only a couple of hours on the train to London from Liverpool, then maybe that would sway in our favour. But yeah, a very good player, but I'm not going to get my hopes up.
No, Formby's lovely as well. If you want somewhere nice to live, like he can go live in Formby. But yeah, I would love Caicedo personally. I really would. But like you say, that old London chestnut could be the one that scuppers our hopes and dreams on that. Just finally, David, I've got to ask you. We've gone through a list of names here, and there's other names beside them. Who would be your ideal choice in that instance?
I'm sure I'm not the only person who has sort of flip-flopped on this a million times already. Like my answer would have been different on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and through the rest of the week. At the moment, my choice, I have kind of landed on the idea that if the money's there, I still want us to sign Romeo Lavia. I think he's such a talented young player that missing the boat on him really could be a problem, because I think if we don't sign him, one of the other big six will, and I think we'd end up regretting it in future. Even though I'd also agree that the fee Southampton are asking is too high. That the whole notion that they should be able to ask for that because of the 40 million release clause Man City have got, I don't agree with, because it's only valid if City are definitely going to trigger it, which I think is far from certain. So I'm not sure that's a basis for the fee, but I still hope we negotiate for him, because I think years to come he really could be a world-class player. And with that in mind, bringing him in, you also wouldn't want to bring in someone who's going to get in his way. So that's why I probably wouldn't go for a Doucoure or a Florentino Luis, because if you're bringing them in, you might as well just bring them in and have Bajcetic as your backup, because those players are obviously ideally going to play 90% of the time. So I would probably therefore go for an older player who also is someone who maybe wouldn't throw a hissy fit for being benched for a 19-year-old every now and again. And I don't know the guy, but I would like to think that Sofian Amrabat would be that modest, just because obviously he's not played for a big club before. And so I think bringing in Amrabat, who was, as said earlier, like profiles really, really well. As you said, like he is an absolute machine running around, hoovering up possession, winning tackles, exactly what we weren't doing last year. You don't fancy all of those images from last year of teams just running through our midfield. You would imagine he would be really, really good in those situations. So I think if we can get him, and even if it's just a case of bring him in, say sign him to a 4-year contract, and after 2 years, if Lavia's really developed and he's now our number one, you could just sell him. Like say to him, spend 2 years here, build up your reputation. We'll sell you to another big club, so where you can play from 29 onwards. So. Yeah, I think that's probably the approach that makes the most sense. But ask me again tomorrow, and I'll have a completely different answer, probably.
Yeah, I'm in exactly the same boat. That's really strange. I would go for exactly the same options personally. I think if we could make something happen in sort of the bigger money scales, like a Caicedo, for instance, like a Tchouaméni, neither of them feel very possible right now. So it's hard to sort of nail your flag to that particular mass. But I think I would be okay. I could make peace, because for me, Amrabat feels like an instant Fabinho replacement, and you've still got your understudy there potentially in Lavia. So yeah, I think I just about for now fall down on the same side as you on that. And like I say, I'm just saying that could change by the time I press end on this Zoom call, let alone anything else. Before we do go though, David, and before we do end, let people know where they can find you, yourself, and of course your work.
Well, I'm on Twitter at David Segar _. And my work can be found on the Opta Analyst website, which is theanalyst.com. And you can also follow Opta Analyst at Opta Analyst. We've got, with the Women's World Cup on at the moment, we've got some very interesting stats hubs that people can play around with, including some chalkboards for each game. So anyone wants to get involved and have a play with them for Women's World Cup games, then they're on the Opta Analyst website.
Oh, superb. Yeah, make sure you do that. And of course, make sure you check out David.